It's just about galactic diplomacy and that cool stuff, right? Who's going to be the ambassador to the Galactic Federation and all those issues. And that's all fine, and there are people talking about that. But that is essentially the icing on a cake that's still in the oven. Contemplate that while I turn this music off. That is, of course, the music for Cosmos, behind the great series by Carl Sagan, who knew full well there was an ET presence, but made an agreement with the government that he would sit on that for whatever they gave him, maybe for reasons that were valid or not. A great man, but a great flaw. So the era of exopolitics begins in 1991. Let's just go over a little bit what went on there. My presentation is 6 hours. 2 3-hour presentations. I just gave half of that in Montreal, 3 full hours. I'm now going to cover a lot of that very, very fast. But believe me, there is a ton of stuff behind what you're going to see. Documents, first-hand accounts. We got the people. We know who they are. I'm not, in fact, when I'm speculating, I'll tell you I'm speculating. So if you don't hear me say I'm speculating, I'm giving you the straight poop, right? You don't have to, worry that, oh, I think he's making up there. I'm not making anything up. Unless I say I'm speculating, no problem. Lawrence Rockefeller approached the Clinton administration in 1993. He wanted that administration to be the disclosure administration and end the truth embargo imposed by the government on the ET presence. He approached Gibbons, who was the head of the Science and Technology Policy Office, and the effort went on for 3 years with meetings and research and a whole book underway and all kinds of stuff. John Gibbons really wanted to be on another planet for this, but he had no choice. Rockefeller was a billionaire, Democrat, an important person. So this went on for 3 years in the White House, and while it was going on, it was being watched carefully by the President of the United States, Bill Clinton. Followed it very well. It was also being watched very carefully by Hillary Clinton, who has probably about a 65% chance of being the next President of the United States. It was also being followed, well, let me mention very quickly that one of the reasons that we know Clinton attention is because he made a couple of maneuvers. One was which he asked Webster Hubbell, his Associate Attorney General and friend from Arkansas, to look into the ET issue at Justice. Hubbell did this. He made calls, he made queries, he even contacted NORAD. Immediately thereafter, they started indicting him for everything, including the killing of Archduke Ferdinand, the sinking of the Maine, right, and Britney Spears' breakdown, whatever. The point is that the man never saw the light of day. He eventually went to prison and went back to Arkansas. There was somebody else watching. That was the senior advisor, policy advisor on a number of areas, one of the closest aide to Clinton, and that was John Podesta. He was famous for being the X-File guy. And another clue we got was that Clinton tasked Podesta to try to revamp the classification schema for government documents so they could get millions of documents out without ever referring to the UFOs. This was a response to the Rockefeller Initiative. And another person was watching from afar. We'll get back to him later. Point out that there's a couple of articles that I found. Here's one, which also confirms that Hillary and Bill Clinton were at Rockefeller's ranch in 1993 and 1994. They were up there, they were with him, they had the chance to talk privately. They've been there a number of times. He died in 2002. And there's no question that while they're up there, they discussed the ET issue with Rockefeller. It's inconceivable with him having an initiative going through the OSTP that they're going to go and not talk to him about this. We only have a private community. So there was something extremely profound going on for 3 years that could have led to Bill Clinton being disclosure president. However, the powers that be did not want that, and they came down on his administration with everything that they had. They strafed it from above, they blew it up from underneath, they attacked everything in that administration, not because he was committing adultery. Virtually everybody that was attacking him was committing adultery. Not because she made $90,000 in pork belly money, that wouldn't even pay the lawn bills of most that were attacking him. They were attacking him because he potentially could have blown the UFO issue out and they weren't ready for it. That's a story that's never been told. Let's hope one day that it is. Very quickly, all the presidents have interacted with this. Truman was critical. He's the one that agreed to launch the bombs in Nagasaki. He was certainly informed about the ET presence. There may have been meetings. He's the one that ordered the shooting downs. Eisenhower was also very important. May have had contact with the ETs in some formal way or informal way. He knew about it, and it was clearly part of his message to the people when he left in 1961, January 1961. Beware of the military-industrial complex. Everybody loved the military-industrial complex. They won World War II. They did pretty well in Korea overall. The corporates were loved. The corporations were loved back then. They had an incredible economy. Why did he want us to beware of them? Not because they were, but because the ET reality was being incorporated into that presence, and that produced an enormous potential for abuse of power. But he couldn't mention that. Gerald Ford is notable because, while he's never been briefed on this issue, he is the one that launched a significant hearing in 1966 when he was a congressman out of Michigan. So he has a legacy there that will always be there. Jimmy Carter is the only president and the only person on a national ticket before I did it to actually bring the UFO issue. He did it in '76. He then launched 2 studies of the extraterrestrial phenomena issue in the first months of his administration. Both of them were quickly shut down by his own administration. And we believe he was then very significantly threatened. Don't go there again, or you're in big trouble. We don't know for sure until he tells us. Reagan, semi-briefed, got some information, not all the information, but it clearly got his attention, and he couldn't help but mention extraterrestrials. I mean, he'd just be sitting there chatting at a cocktail party, and the next thing you know, he's talking about ETs. Drove his advisors, and it's crazy. He was famous for bringing up the issue of ETs would then bring us all together if they were a threat. He brought it up to Gorbachev, brought it up to the UN. He has a place in all this. And then, of course, Bill Clinton has a significant place in all this, which is nowhere near being finished. But exopolitics itself, the term, doesn't exist until 2000, right? 4 years after the Rockefeller Initiative ends. And it's because this gentleman, Alfred Weber, writes a book about it and coins the term. It existed in a Jewish doctor from Yale, a great man, a peace activist, tremendous sacrifice, very long story there. But he was involved in one of the Carter ET studies. And of course, he can talk about that first person. Another person entered at exactly the same time as Weber, and that is a gentleman by the name of Danny Sheehan. He turned 2000 with information about the other ET study, right, that got shut down. Danny has 3.5 degrees from Harvard, a BA in, a focus on constitutional law. He has a Harvard Law JD, 1970. Then he got a master's from the Divinity School, and then he worked toward a PhD from the Divinity School. He is quite a man, a great man. Did a lot of things, had some difficult times. He was crushed by the government, really big time. If I have time, I'll talk about it a little bit. But very quick story. He turned up on the scene, my radar, almost exactly the same time as Weber, and I immediately saw the implications of this, and I immediately arranged, because I'd done many shows on Coast to Coast, and I got in touch with Art Bell, and we arranged for both of them to come on the Bell Show with me together, right, and talk about these 2 studies, right? A Juris Doctor from Yale, a Juris Doctor from Harvard. It was an extremely powerful show. If you look hard enough, some people have copies. It goes all the way back to 2000, and this was one of the last shows. I did a few more shows, and then in 2001, Clear Channel Communication, which is run by a very, very right-wing fundamentalist Christian family out of San Antonio, bought and created the largest radio monopoly in history, bought Premier Broadcasting, which owned Coast to Coast, and after that, I was never invited again. And none of my correspondence was ever again. I did get on the show once because somebody interceded on my behalf and begged them to bring me on, and I did get on that one time. But that's all in 6 years. In the political chess game that's going on, they won that. They made a very good move. My hat's off to them. But they hurt my work tremendously. Then in 2001, another event occurred when Stephen Greer, who was a player in the exopolitics from the very 100 reporters and 17 camera crews from national and international stations, plus an additional 100 attendees, just general. That's good because it meant hundreds of thousands of people tried to log on. The witnesses, many of which were there in person, gave their testimony. And media began to do something. I received a call that night from ABC from my contact that Ted Koppel was ready to move. They wanted 6 witnesses to start with. We gave them 6 and threw in Edgar Mitchell for free. This was a major event. This is the culmination of Greer's work. This was the ultimate achievement, I think. And I was standing, by the way, kind of just off the camera here, okay? Almost 4 years to the day. Let me repeat this. This is my quote. Whenever the human race begins to set its house in order, someone will blow something up. Every time.